A critical analysis of Buddhism. About 2,500 years ago, a Hindu prince named Siddhartha Gautama aka Buddha Shakyamuni, 589 BC, the founder of Buddhism, was born in the north of India, leading a happy and indulgent childhood, protected from the harsh realities of life. At age 29, he walked out of his comfort zone and witnessed the harsh realities of life. Moved by all the suffering he saw, he vowed to search for the meaning of an existence. He set off to be a wandering ascetic, depriving himself of every comfort through self-imposed discipline. After 6 years, when almost starving to death, he concluded that neither indulgence nor deprivation was the way to truth, so a middle way was suitable. He sat under a peepal tree and vowed not to get up until he understood what was to be understood after having been already concluded. On the 7th day, with the morning star shining in the sky, he became enlightened. This statement lacks verifiable evidence. This concoction is the telltale story of a person who probably was suffering from mental disintegration due to hunger, so claimed to have woken up or enlightened. It is how the Buddha came into being. He conjectured that what he had seen was there for all but could not be spoken about. So, he contemplated how to create and preach Buddhism, hence encroaching on Hindu rudimentary philosophy, which he already knew, divested it from Godhead, fabricated a few other rules, and he was well on his mission. He spent the next 45 years traveling widely and teaching the Four Noble Truths and other teachings known as the Dharma. He urged people not to be satisfied with hearsay or tradition, religion, but to look within to see the truth, and his last words were, "Work out your own salvation with diligence." The Four Noble or Ennobling Truths are, 1. Suffering. Life is inherently unsatisfactory because everything is impermanent, ever-changing. 2. The origins of suffering. We suffer because we cling to things we like and reject those we don't, becoming trapped in a cycle of life and death, being and becoming called samsara. 3. The cessation of suffering. Recognizing impermanence and letting go of desire and the desiring self ends suffering. Sorrow and grief, joy and happiness can come and go without attachment, leading to nirvana. 4. The way. The Buddha recommended an eightfold path of correct understanding, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Heart and mind, or wisdom and compassion, are seen as inseparable. This path has no concern with religion, belief, prayer, worship, or ceremony. Rahula, 1959, pages 49 to 50, it is more like the rejection of a religion and its rituals. Nevertheless, many of the Buddha's discourses were passed on by oral tradition and then written down several hundred years later as the sutras, yet despite his warnings against relying on hearsay and tradition, Buddhism became a man-made religion, spreading to southern India, Ceylon, and Burma as Theravada Buddhism, and elsewhere as Mahayana Buddhism. It spread to Tibet, adding the Hindu priests' concocted concept of reincarnation to justify the sufferings in the world due to previous karma, volition/acts, as local folklore is already popular there. Reincarnation is not adopted by Zen Buddhists in China and Japan, for it contradicts the concepts of impermanence and emptiness of the self. Buddhism spread along the Silk Route from India to China, where it became Chan Buddhism, and in Japan, Zen Buddhism, and eventually also spread to the West. Humphreys, 1951, Batchelor, 1994. Zen Buddhism can no more be explained than a joke. You see it, or you don't. Humphreys, 1949/1951, p. 3. According to some scientific researchers, Buddhism's assertion of lack of Godhead, self, and non-duality and constant shifting of goalposts, unlike divine religions, are the contexts where spiritual and scientific learning come closest. There are many possible reasons for this closeness. In his book Waking Up, American neuroscientist Sam Harris, a hardcore atheist, compares the Buddha with Jesus. Buddhism is an atheistic ideology that teaches no creator, no self, and non-duality more consistently than any other tradition. American philosopher William Mikulas agrees that main reason for the dialogue between science and Buddhism is its focus on methods, not doctrines. However, this claim would not hold water because many later accretions and sects in many parts of the world are involved in rituals and belief systems like any other religion. Buddhists are urged not to worship anyone or believe in any doctrine but to inquire into their own minds. In Buddhism Without Beliefs, the British scholar and then Buddhist Stephen Batchelor, 1997, explains that the noble truths are not propositions to be believed in, but truths to be acted upon that will supposedly reveal the emptiness and impermanence of all phenomena, the illusory nature of self, and the origins and ending of suffering. Maybe this is why Tibetan Buddhist Dalai Lama is living and enjoying in exile. Since 1987, the present Dalai Lama, head of the Gelug sect of Tibetan Buddhism, has had a series of dialogues with Western scientists, and in 2005, despite some protests that this was an inappropriate mixing of science and religion, was invited to speak at the annual Society for Neuroscience conference. However, he has no conventional or science education. He has since continued trying to build bridges between Buddhism and science. These efforts have resulted in projects like the Atlas of Emotions compiled by psychologist Paul Ekman and social science and public health researcher Eve Ekman in collaboration with the Dalai Lama, intended as a tool to help people choose, if not what emotions to feel, at least how to respond to those we do feel. Dalai Lama is being supported by the West more for political reasons, China bashing, than genuinely doctrinal or scientific reasons. The Buddha taught that all things are relative and interdependent, arising from what came before and, in turn, giving rise to something else in a vast web of causes and effects. This assertion, however, can be considered as an early statement of a scientific principle of cause and effect, and of the conviction that there is no magic, no skyhooks involved. This conception of an interconnected, causal universe is compatible with fundamental physics and modern science naturalism in a way that the universe is not created and sustained by any god. How can we be sure that the Buddhist claim to have dropped the illusions is true? It is a question that the scientific study of spiritual experience must address. There are other reasons to be skeptical about the fit between Buddhism and science. Some core Buddhist teachings, such as the Abhidharma, may appear more like psychology than doctrine, including complex categorizations and long lists of mental phenomena with their origins and interconnections. Yet, unlike scientific psychology, these schemes are fixed and unchanging, more akin to doctrines to be learned and believed than hypotheses about the mind to be tested by experimentation. In this sense, they become more like religious dogmas than the Buddha's urging not to depend on scriptures and doctrines but to work towards one's own awakening. Buddhism seems to be closer to psychotherapy than to science. Or concocted mythology. According to American neurologist and author James Austin, Zen traditions within Buddhism are the approach most systematic yet most elusive, the clearest yet most paradoxical, the subtlest yet most dramatic, and is untainted by belief in the supernatural or the superstitious. It is also less preoccupied with outward forms than Tibetan Buddhism, which uses elaborate altars, images, and complex visualizations of deities, each with different movements, clothes, adornments, and colors, that does not necessarily appeal to philosophers and scientists seeking to understand the mind. Suffering from social, psychological, medical, worldly, and spiritual problems is called samsara, being trapped in the cycle of life and death, and freedom from it is enlightenment. The characteristic of enlightenment is a permanent freeing of the individual from the illusion that he is doing. The aim of Dharma practice is antithetical to free will, to free from the illusion of freedom. The British philosopher Alan Watts, 1961, brought Eastern teachings to the West in the 1940s and wrote extensively on Zen Buddhism. He said that looking into Buddhism, Taoism, Vedanta, and Yoga, we do not find either philosophy or religion as understood in the West, but something more nearly resembling psychotherapy. Western psychotherapy aims to create a coherent sense of self, while Buddhist psychology aims at transcending the self. Buddhism endeavors to produce a hermit who shuns society and lives in a cave, a teacher who rejects all conventional teachings, or a wild and crazy wise whose equanimity and compassion shine through his mad behavior, analogs to a Hindu yogi taking Boomba's refuge in the jungle. Thank you for using Panopreter Basic. In all these isms/mythologies, the goal is worldly happiness, not the truth. Here, the emphasis is on disassociation and letting it, self/ego, go in the temporal sense, whereas, in divine religions, especially in Islam, it is subduing and training the self for success in the temporal and spiritual realm. Buddhism stands unique in the history of human thought in denying the existence of soul, self, or Atman. According to the teaching of the Buddha, the idea of self is an imaginary, false belief having no corresponding reality, and it produces harmful thoughts of me and mine. The Buddha urged people to see things as they are, by whom, there is no seer in Buddhism, to see that what we call I, or being, is only a combination of physical and mental aggregates, which are working together interdependently in a flux of momentary change within the law of cause and effect, and that there is nothing permanent, everlasting, unchanging, and eternal in the whole of existence. Buddhism also claims that there is no thinker, but the thought itself thinks. That mean, free will is also an illusion. The Sri Lankan monk and Buddhist scholar Walpola Rahula, 1959, p. 66. American psychotherapist and Buddhist Jack Engler asserted that those who, mostly Westerners, get attracted to Buddhism because of failures in self-development or as a way of avoiding facing themselves run the risk of further fragmenting their already fragile sense of self, therefore, might be therapeutically harmful. He advocated that facing crucial developmental or life stages head-on instead of attempting to avoid them in the name of spirituality or enlightenment will let them be somebody before becoming nobody. Those seeking spiritual awakening or enlightenment should understand that it is an accident that is not exclusive to Buddhism or any other ism and may happen even without meditation, for meditation makes one simply more accident-prone. Pure consciousness/awakening. There is no such thing as pure consciousness or awakening. It is a gloriously paradoxical illusion, which Buddhism claims to destroy. Glorious nonsense. Self-deception sometimes is termed as insight. Metzinger, 2009. Thank you for using Panopreter Basic. It is, however, not a denial of the higher consciousness, or altered state of consciousness. An impossible situation fabricated by Buddhism. An unmotivated non-volitional functioning. When the false view gets removed, people continue to act, think, and do things, but they no longer accumulate karma, volition/act, because they are free from the false idea that they are a self who acts. It is non-action or not doing. It is how things are because there is no entity to act, no entity to be, either bound or free. Wei Wu Wei, 2004. Wu Wei, whose name comes from Taoism, suggests asking yourself whether you are not still looking as from a phenomenal center that has only an imaginary existence. If so, you got misled. If not, you will understand at once. Watts, 1957, p. 163. It is in stark contradiction to the Buddhist concept of reincarnation. Other contradictions. If we first establish peace within our minds by training in spiritual paths, outer peace will come naturally. Otherwise, world peace will never be there, no matter how many people campaign for it. Buddhism denies the existence of soul or spirit. Karma, volition/act, is based on the Hindu concoction of the past life to justify suffering in the present life. Reincarnation. What is impermanence? One of the most fundamental truths of Buddhism is this: everything changes. Things cannot change without first being in material or conceptual existence. Buddhism denies permanence, God, soul, and self. What do Buddhists mean when they talk about emptiness? An often misunderstood term, emptiness, shunyata, refers not to nothingness but to interdependence and the emptiness of a separate, fixed existence. An existence relates to nature or universe in flux, so, who is contemplating here? What is dependent origination? There is nothing that exists independently. The links in the chain of dependent origination, or conditions co-arising, are causing the never-ending cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Buddhism seems confused here by asserting the materiality of cause and effect and limiting the incarnation cycle to six, preempting the infinite regrets. What are the six realms? Represented in the wheel of life, Bhava Chakra, the six realms of rebirth are a framework from where beings are reborn according to their way of life. Do Buddhists believe in God? Buddhism is generally considered a non-theistic ideology that doesn't require a belief in a supreme being. But there are supernatural beings in Buddhist cosmology. In Buddhism, female monks are subservient to the male monks. According to Buddhist scriptures, Pali-aya, Buddha initially refused to accept women as monks. He said they would distort his teachings. Buddha very explicitly instructs wives to obey their husbands. Buddha had a negative view of women, seeing them as morally wicked, dangerous, and controlled by lust, impure, dull, smelling, frightening, dangerous, wrathful, hostile, adulterous, virulent, venom, double-tongued, and they betray friends. According to tradition, the Buddha Shakyamuni abandoned his wife and child and refused to care for them to focus exclusively on attaining an enlightened state of mind. Buddhist treatise called Tamada endorses patriarchal authority and the physical disciplining of wives. The husband is the lord of his wife, Shaumya. Conclusion. In the light of hodgepodge and contradictory ideas fabricating the so-called Buddhist doctrine, it becomes clear that Buddha Shakyamuni was suffering from mental disintegration, intellectual incoherence, and cognitive dissonance, yet inclined to express his anti-religion, most likely Hinduism, feelings while reminiscing his lost princely glory, found traditionally poor, illiterate peasant followers as his best bet. The West became interested in propping him for two reasons. 1. He was promoting seemingly naturalist, atheistic, ideas. Secondly, to use him for political reasons, China bashing, as he was stopped from entering his native land, Tibet, China. Buddhism. After a short-lived love affair with the West, losing its luster, stagnated. The global Buddhist population, according to research, is expected to remain stable for a while, but then will begin declining because of a few new conversions to Buddhism, more conversions to other faiths, low fertility rates, and aging populations in countries such as China, Thailand, Japan, and elsewhere. Comment / share / like and subscribe. Shakir Mumtaz. Author, thinker, analyst. Share this with friends and other sites. This audio file was created by Panopreter Basic. You can download it at www.panopreter.com.